I walked into my son's backyard and froze when I heard the words, "Why is she even still alive?" The voice came from the other side of the wooden gate, sharp enough to cut through the summer air. A laugh followed, not loud, but quick and cruel, the kind that splits something inside you even if you don't want it to. I stood there for a moment, with a glass dish of apple cobbler still warm in my hands. My fingers didn't shake. Not yet. I didn't turn away. I pushed the gate open and stepped inside as though I had heard nothing at all. The backyard was strung with lights, the kind Daniel had once begged me to buy when he was a teenager. Cheap bulbs to make everything look like a celebration. There were long picnic tables, crowded with faces, some I knew, some I didn't. None of them looked up when I walked past. "Oh, Elaine, we didn't know you were coming." That was Jody, my son's wife, the same voice I'd just heard. "I brought cobbler," I said, holding the dish a little higher. No one offered to take it. I set it down myself on the edge of a table and found an empty folding chair at the far end. It creaked beneath me as I sat. My back ached, but I forced myself upright. The air smelled of grilled meat and citronella candles. Music played too loud from someone's phone speaker, something fast, something careless. Daniel stood near the grill, a beer raised in his hand. "To family," he called out. Glasses clinked. Laughter rolled. No one turned toward me. The children, my grandchildren, ran past 3 times, squealing, chasing each other across the grass. Not once did they stop. Not once did they say hello. I wondered if they even recognized me without the grocery bags, without the apron. I used to carry gummy worms in little plastic bags just for them. That memory felt like it belonged to another woman, not me. Jody approached eventually, her smile tight and practiced, the kind she saves for photographs. "Did you want a plate?" "I'm fine," I said. She nodded too quickly, her eyes already moving past me, and slipped away before I could add anything else. I stayed until the end. I stacked plates, folded napkins, wiped down sticky tables, while the others drifted indoors. When the crowd thinned, I picked up my empty cobbler dish, still warm from the sun, and carried it out, not in anger, not in sorrow, but with a decision already forming, quiet and sharp as the words I had heard at the gate. The next morning, I brewed coffee in the smallest pot I owned, just 1 cup. I sat at the table by the kitchen window, the same table where Daniel used to do his homework when he was a boy. His legs were too long for the chair, his pencil always tapping, his questions always spilling out faster than I could answer. Back then he needed me. Now he only tolerated me. The cobbler dish was clean and dry, already back in the cupboard. I pulled in the mail, but didn't open it. I couldn't bear to see his name on the electricity bill again. The house I once partly paid for now tied to him alone, because I had given him that chance. I had drained $40,000 from my retirement account years ago, when he and Jody were just starting out. I'd told myself it was for family, for their security, for the grandchildren I believed would want me around. I had called it a gift. I had even written those words. But last night, as I sat ignored at the far edge of my own son's table, I began to wonder. A gift should never mean erasure, sir. I walked to the hallway cabinet and pulled out the old file boxes. The folder was labeled in my handwriting, Daniel, House. Inside were the documents I'd never looked at closely. The purchase agreement, the deed, and a letter written in my own pen. "Because you are my son, I have no expectation of repayment." I traced the words with my fingertip. The paper had yellowed around the edges, but my signature was still strong, still deliberate. I had meant it at the time, and maybe that was the hardest part, not that they had taken, but that I had offered so willingly to people who now wished I wasn't alive. By evening, I knew I couldn't sit alone with these thoughts. I called a woman named Marjorie. We weren't close friends, but she had once been a probate lawyer. We'd met years ago at a church fundraiser, exchanged numbers, and every so often we checked in. When she answered, I heard the steadiness in her voice, the kind that makes you want to confess. "Marjorie," I said, "I have questions about property and gifts." She didn't ask why. She only said, "Bring everything tomorrow. We'll go through it together." That night I ironed slacks, laid out a blouse with buttons, and polished shoes I hadn't worn in years. Not because anyone was watching, but because when you're about to change the shape of your life, you wear something that reminds you of your spine. Marjorie's house smelled of lemon polish and peppermint tea. She wore her hair pinned back with the same silver clip I remembered from years ago. She looked over the folder I brought, flipping through each page with practiced calm. "You were generous," she said at last, sliding the letter across the table. "Foolish," I whispered. Marjorie shook her head. "No, you gave in love. That doesn't make you a fool. But listen carefully, Elaine. The house is theirs. Your signature gave it away. You can't undo that. What you can do is protect what remains." Her words steadied me like a hand at my back. She made me a checklist: accounts, wills, powers of attorney. She told me that I wasn't powerless, not if I chose to act. I folded the paper in half, slipped it into my purse, and walked out into the cool Columbus morning, feeling taller than I had in years. That afternoon I went to the bank. The lobby smelled faintly of paper and ink, a scent I'd always associated with safety. When the manager, a young woman named Tasha, asked how she could help me, I said simply, "I want to review every authorized user on my accounts." Her fingers tapped quickly on the keyboard. "You have one co-signer listed, Daniel Turner. Your son? Used to be," I said quietly. She looked at me carefully. "Would you like to remove him?" "Yes, remove him completely." It took forms and signatures, but by the time I walked out, the accounts were mine alone again. For the first time in years, I held the only keys to my own future. That evening, back at home, I pulled my old address book from the drawer. The pages were yellowed, the tabs frayed. I found Daniel's name, written in my hand, his number in bold ink. Slowly, deliberately, I drew a line through it. One clean stroke, not anger, just finality. The house felt heavy with silence, but I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I went into the kitchen, pulled out flour, sugar, and annulled blueberries, and baked a pie. The good recipe, the one I used to save for Thanksgivings and birthdays. This time, it wasn't for them, it was for me. As the crust turned golden in the oven, the smell filled the house like a memory rewritten. Later, there was a knock at the door. It was Clara from next door, holding a container of lentil soup. She asked if I'd seen her cat. I hadn't, but I invited her in. We sat at the kitchen table, splitting the pie while the soup cooled between us. She didn't ask about Daniel. She just said, "This pie is so good it makes my knees hum." We laughed, and the sound startled me. It had been so long since laughter in my kitchen didn't cost me something. By the next week, the phone began to ring more often. Daniel left 2 voicemails in one day. His voice caught somewhere between confusion and irritation. "Mom, what's going on? Jody says you've been distant. Did we do something? Just call me back." I didn't. The silence between us grew like ivy, climbing across the days. It wasn't peace yet, but it was space. On Thursday evening, the inevitable knock came. When I opened the door, Jody stood on the porch, a purse looped over her arm, like armor. Her smile was brittle, the kind that showed teeth, but no warmth. "Elaine," she said, "we need to talk." I stepped aside, though I wasn't sure why. She walked in as if the house still belonged to her story. She looked around at the boxes stacked near the hallway and pursed her lips. "This is getting out of hand," she began. "You've been avoiding calls. You made changes at the bank. Daniel saw the notices. And you've been cold. We're your family. You can't just shut us out because of one misunderstanding." I let her words hang in the air. Then I said, "It wasn't one misunderstanding. It was years." She blinked. Years of being seated at the far end of every table. Years of being invited late, if at all. Years of being useful when you needed money or babysitting, and invisible the moment I wasn't convenient. "You call that family?" Jody's voice sharpened. "You're exaggerating. We never asked for anything." "That's the problem," I replied. "You never asked. You just expected." Her eyes flashed. "Daniel is a good man. He works hard. He's given you everything a son could. I felt my back straighten. Good men don't laugh when someone wonders aloud why their mother is still alive. For a moment, her mask slipped. I saw the guilt flicker, then vanish beneath anger. "Don't expect us to come running when you change your mind," she said, her voice flat. I almost smiled. "I am not running," I answered, "and I will not." Her heels clicked hard against the floor as she left. The door shut behind her like punctuation at the end of a chapter. I stood in the silence, breathing evenly. There was no triumph in me, only clarity. For the first time in decades, I hadn't softened my truth to make someone else more comfortable, and that small act felt like a revolution. The call came on a gray Sunday evening. I almost didn't answer. The number was unfamiliar, and I had grown used to letting silence guard me. But something in me pressed the button. "Grandma." The voice was small, tentative. "Emily." A pause. "Yeah, I found your number on one of Dad's old phones." He doesn't know I called. I held the receiver tighter, waiting. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, the words tumbling out, "for not talking to you at the library that day, for laughing when Mom made that joke at your expense. It wasn't funny, you just wanted to belong," I finished gently. "Yes," she whispered. "And I miss you. I miss how you used to braid my hair before school. I miss the stickers you kept in the hallway drawer. I even miss your banana bread." The ache in my chest was sharp, but not unwelcome. "Thank you for saying that, Emily. Could I see you, just me, not Dad, not Mom?" I thought of the cobbler dish, the empty chair at the end of the table, the years of silence folded over like unused linens. But I also thought of the little girl who once slipped her hand into mine on icy sidewalks. "Yes," I said. "Come tomorrow after school." When the knock came at 4:10, I opened the door, bore to a girl taller than I remembered, her hoodie too big, her shoelaces undone. Her eyes were rimmed with something that wasn't just mascara. "I wasn't sure you'd open," she admitted. "I wasn't sure you'd knock," I replied. Inside, she picked at the slice of pie I'd saved and sipped tea she didn't really like. She looked around the kitchen, as if searching for proof that the past still lived there. "Mom says you're cutting us out," she said at last. Not accusing, just curious. "I'm not cutting," I told her. "I'm choosing. There's a difference." She nodded slowly, as though she understood more than her 16 years should allow. Then she pulled a folded paper from her backpack. "I drew something for you." It was a sketch, rough pencil lines, but steady. A queen seated at a chessboard. Only 2 pieces on her side, but they were in winning positions against a full set. "She's not done," Emily said softly. "She's just starting her game." For the first time in weeks, I felt something stir that wasn't anger or grief. I reached across the table and touched her hand. "Can I hang it in my new place?" I asked. Her whole face brightened. "Really?" "Yes." And just like that, a door I thought was locked forever opened a sliver. Not for everyone, but for the one who knocked with care. On Tuesday afternoon, I toured a modest apartment complex on the quieter side of Columbus. Brick buildings, lined with tidy flower beds, a courtyard with a single bench beneath a linden tree. The manager, a woman named Teresa, greeted me with a smile that felt unhurried, like she actually had time for me. She unlocked the door to Unit 2B. "It's small," she warned, "but bright. South-facing windows, first floor, easy access." The space smelled of fresh paint, not history. 2 rooms, a narrow kitchen, a washer and dryer tucked behind folding doors. No echoes of voices that grew sharp or dismissive, just clean walls, waiting. I ran my hand across the counter. It wasn't marble. It didn't need to be. The hum of the refrigerator was steady, as if it were whispering, "Here, you belong." "I'll take it," I said. Teresa blinked. "Don't you want to think about it?" "I already have." That evening, I signed the lease. Move-in day was set for the 1st of next month. 3 weeks. Enough time to leave with care, not haste. At home, I began packing. 1 box at a time, I labeled them carefully. Keep, donate, memories. In the guest room, an old dresser Daniel and Jody once refused when they needed furniture. Too dated, they said. I ran my hand across the wood grain and wrote donate on a piece of tape. In the hallway, I paused by a framed cross-stitch from my sister that read, "Peace lives here." It had hung so long that the wall behind it was brighter than the paint around it. I packed it in the box labeled keep. Daniel's old room was still frozen in time. Curtains with faded sailboats, a box of baseball cards, a shoebox marked private. I didn't open it. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared out at the crooked apple tree. It leaned to the left now, but it still bloomed every spring, stubborn and bright. I remembered the day Daniel climbed too high in that tree, crying until I dragged out the ladder, barefoot and furious. He hugged me afterward, shaking. "Don't tell anyone," he said. And I never did. I wrote on my notepad, "Leave the curtains, take the quilt." By nightfall, the house looked half empty. The walls exhaled around me, not resentful, just tired. I brewed tea and sat among the boxes, the air thick with both endings and beginnings. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting to be included. I was planning my own place at the table. The night before the movers were scheduled, I heard a car idling outside. I looked through the curtains and saw Daniel sitting in the driveway, his hands gripping the steering wheel like it might steady him. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he stepped out and walked toward the porch. His knock was hesitant. "Mom?" His voice was lower than I remembered. "Can we talk?" I opened the door just enough to face him, not enough to invite him in. "You changed the locks. You blocked my number. You cut me off at the bank. What's happening?" His eyes searched mine, pleading. "I heard what Jody said in the backyard," I told him evenly. "And I heard you laugh." He winced. "I didn't mean it. You know how she is. She runs her mouth. It was just a joke," I interrupted. "No, Daniel. A joke has a punchline." That was cruelty wrapped in silence. He shifted, his shoulders slumping. "I didn't know you were there." "That's exactly the problem," I said. "You never know when I'm there. You never see me." His frustration broke through. "So that's it? You're throwing me away over one bad afternoon?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. "One afternoon? Daniel, it wasn't one afternoon. It was years. Years of being seated behind centerpieces so I wouldn't ruin the picture. Years of being invited late, dismissed quickly, tolerated instead of welcomed. That day in the backyard was only the final straw." He took a step closer. "Ruby says you're letting her visit. So she gets a pass?" "No," I answered firmly. "She knocked on your own. She asked to come back. You waited until your name started disappearing from my papers." His face hardened. "This is about money, isn't it?" "No," I said. "This is about dignity." He glanced past me into the hallway, as though expecting to see the familiar photos, the ones I'd already packed away. For once, the house gave him nothing. I reached to the small table by the door and picked up a sealed envelope. I pressed it into his hand. "You already own the house," I told him. "That is enough." He looked down at it, then back at me, confusion warring with shame. "I'll always be your son," he said quietly. "And I'll always be the woman who gave you more than she should have," I replied. Then I closed the door, not with anger, not with grief. Just finality. Through the window, I watched him linger a moment longer, then walk back to his car. The engine faded into the night. For the first time in years, the silence that followed did not wound me. It steadied me. Moving day arrived without ceremony. I woke before dawn, brewed coffee in the chipped mug I had carried through decades, and stood barefoot in the kitchen one last time. The linoleum was cool beneath my feet. The walls were bare, the shelves empty, the house exhaling like it knew I was letting it go. The movers came at 9. By noon, the boxes were stacked neatly in my new apartment across Columbus. Teresa from the leasing office brought me a welcome packet and a tiny succulent in a clay pot. "Something green for your window," she said kindly. I placed it by the sink, a small beginning. The first thing I unpacked was the kettle. The second was Emily's drawing, the queen at her chessboard, still playing her own game. I hung it where the afternoon light could catch the pencil strokes, turning them almost silver. That evening, I baked banana bread. The smell filled the small apartment until it felt less like a space and more like a home. When the oven timer chimed, there was a knock at the door. Emily stood there, clutching a jar of jam. "I brought something to go with it," she said shyly. We sat at the little table by the window, spreading jam on warm slices, talking about school, books, and a cat she wanted to adopt one day. Not once did she mention her parents. Not once did I ask. Some threads didn't need tying anymore. Later that week, I visited the women's shelter on Greenway Avenue. I handed the director a check, proceeds from the sale of the house. "This is for the women who leave without shoes," I told her. She started to cry. I didn't. My tears had already been spent. This wasn't grief. This was intention. Back in my apartment, I planted marigold seeds in a small pot by the window. They leaned toward the light, stubborn and resilient, like me. The phone rang a few days later, Daniel's voice on the machine. Mom, I don't know how to fix this. Ruby talks about you every day. I'm sorry. I hope you'll let me try." I folded the letter he sent afterward and placed it in a drawer. Not forgiveness, not refusal, just space. On my 73rd birthday, I woke without an alarm. No balloons, no forced smiles, just sunlight through clean curtains, the steady breath of a life that was mine alone. Emily brought tulips and a handmade card with a painted porch and 2 chairs, one empty, one with a teacup. Inside she'd written, "Thanks for keeping a seat for me." We drank tea together, quiet and content, and I knew then the answer to the question I had once overheard at the gate. Why was I still alive? To remember my name, to set my own table, and to leave the door open only for those who knock with care.